There you go.
No, I'm good. All good.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Inputs, a Clay Hills podcast that we've been doing every 2 weeks and having a special guest for each show that they can tell us about their business and some of the different products that they've had very effective in the market. John Dinslage is the product manager for Clay Hills Ag in Nebraska at Richland. And our special guest today is John King. And he is with Michlig, I believe,
Michlig, yep.
Ag Solutions. And he is in Iowa and Illinois. And he has some really interesting technologies that he's been using that has been so effective, out there. I know the season's kind of winding down as far as post-emerge applications, fungicides, and for the most part, John, is the corn crop and soybean crop in Nebraska looking pretty good?
Yeah, things are pretty good. We had some droughty weather early on for our dryland guys in the dryland hills. Definitely got stress, definitely showed some stress, and it's been, for the irrigated crop, looks pretty dang good. We've had some really dang good rains here, I'd say, in the last 3 weeks. So that's going to help quite a bit finish off the bean crop. I think we will have a pretty good bean crop. I think our corn will be decent. Like again, our dryland corn, it was pretty exciting. I mean, it's never exciting when it doesn't rain, but it was exciting for us in some new development type of stuff as we're moving forward and trying to come up with some very unique things in the market. Trying to make sure that we're looking out for the end user, right? So the thing that we learned this year in the dryland stress areas was we came out with some products and it really showed and shined in that stress environment. A couple different things, some things that John and I are working on along with some things that we're doing on our own. And it's just been extremely interesting to see and get constant phone calls regularly saying, man, you got to come and look at this. So that's fun and exciting, but it's never fun and exciting that the weather doesn't cooperate completely. But we all know that that's all part of the variables year to year, right? So we just got to do our best to try to find a way for the end user without adding a bunch of additional costs. So, yep, that's kind of where we're at so far this season.
Well, I just know, John, you're always coming up with a lot of different inputs that really help the growers possibly lower the price per acre on these expensive inputs that we have. And this year, what would you say has been the biggest impact that you have seen on some of the new techniques?
Hey, Jim, so the last part you were asking basically some of the what was the most unique things that we're seeing so far? You were cutting out a little bit.
Yes.
As of right now,
Yeah.
there's some unique things we're seeing in the trench that we're doing that we haven't done before. Some seed treatment things that's been we're seeing some very unique positive results there. And then the other thing that's really showing up that we're getting a lot of phone calls on is our B32 concept, B32 product. And essentially what that is we started last year doing a lot of testing and trials on that, and we wanted, say, 10% of our UAN acres to go out, or tons to go out with our unique humic acid, and we got about 5%, but we had that placed in a lot of different areas and different scenarios to see, to get the best testing we could, tissue samples, stock nitrate tests, those kinds of things. And this year, obviously, with those results and the way we bring it to market, 95% of our UAN tons were used in that manner this year. So that's probably the most unique thing. And when I say 95% of the tons, that means a majority of it, obviously. And so we've had a lot of phone calls weekly, almost daily, especially this time of the year. Guys are looking at it saying, hey, I'm doing sap analysis, I'm doing tissue samples, I'm running this thing all the way through, I'm doing soil samples, and I'm getting to where I don't need those extra tons that I booked. It just everything is looking very, very, very good, and I'm using certain software to hit a target. I'm good on my yield goals. We're looking at every stage throughout the growing season, and it looks really good. Along with just brighter green corn. The stand from the beginning with some of the things that John and I are doing has showed up. But I'd say the biggest thing that I'm noticing, just because the amount of acres that we have out there and the phone calls we're getting, is using humic acid, and specifically our unique formulation of humic acid in a nitrogen play. Forever we've looked at the humic acid in a phosphorus play, and then also just in the soil and soil health. And we've done a lot of testing and studies for years. I've been doing it for probably 6 to 8 years, but we have come to a whole new level doing it this way. That's the thing that shined the most so far, I would say.
That's got to be really encouraging, and to see these farmers actually get more out of the nutrients that they have been putting out there, and the bank of nutrients have been building up in the soil that you've been able to unlock and open that barn door. And you found a way to go ahead and reduce some of the pricing for these nutrients that these poor farmers are having to pay for. This is a real positive message that we're getting out. John, being our special guest, would you tell us a little bit about your business and exactly, what type of things you're trying to do, like John is in Nebraska?
Yeah. So our business, and really it's a little bit of a longer story, but our business really started back in the 80s with my last name's King, but our business name is Michlig. And it all started with my grandfather, it'd be my mom's dad, back in the 80s, where he started Michlig Agri Center back in little old Manlius, Illinois. And we were really, at the beginning, just a local feed store. We had grain bins, different things like that. And then in the early 90s, my dad was lucky enough to be able to buy the business from my grandfather, and really he never changed the name, he kept it, and began to grow it. And were pretty much full service agronomy. We had feed, we had petroleum, we had grain, we were everything for a long, long time. And then over the years, we eventually kind of got out of those businesses, and eventually, it's like anything, you get out of stuff, and then you figure out a new thing you're going to do. And in 2024, we started Michlig Ag Solutions, which was originally started as a consulting business, and it was just me and my dad, and we were working with independent retailers, cooperatives, specialty products companies. And a lot of my background has been either in commercial fertilizer, both on the manufacturing and import side. And then, I obviously grew up in the retail business and have been lucky enough in a previous life to be a part of building, some of these specialty formulation facilities, and really building into what the products look like. And just found a passion for it. And when I started my consulting company, that's a lot of what I was doing on the front side, was just working with especially crop nutrient products in different companies, and then also working with ag retailers to really help them understand what their beliefs were, what their customer beliefs were, what products fit their business, and trying to help them build what they were going to do. And then I think it was probably 6 months after we started the business when we hired another individual that came on, and he was more grain background. And then we got into commercial grain consulting and grower risk management consulting and brokerage and all that good stuff. So it's like any business, it's an evolution. You pick up one thing, and it's kind of like early days. The next shiniest thing shines bright, and you figure out a way to get into it. And then about a year ago, we built a manufacturing plant where we're focused on building premium seed fluency products, as well as water soluble biologicals, really anything that's a powder. And that's again, just from my background on the formulation side, it was something that obviously the market's growing on that business, especially around the seed fluency side. And I would say overall adoption from growers really on the biological side And, there wasn't much specialized manufacturing for that business out there. So we saw an opportunity to come in and again, really with what our beliefs were, right? It starts with the farmer, what's valuable for the farmer, how does a retailer, market that and create a business for themselves out of it. And then, I hate saying it a lot of times, but a lot of times I look at our business, we're a full service packaging company, and a lot of what we do is private label. We push it that way because we believe that, even though we love our Michlig brand, and what it means, but, locally in everybody's market, our brand doesn't mean anything. It's all about them. So, um, a lot of it starts with, designing what the product functions are, designing what the price point that those customers want to be able to target their growers at. And then from there, it's all about how do we add as much value to a product for a grower to create an ROI. And it's kind of taken off, and it's been a really fun, it's been a fun year. It's like anything, we broke ground about a year ago, maybe a little, I guess, yeah, maybe 13 months ago, and started selling product and started getting sales on, and we're waiting for equipment, and it was helter skelter, Jan, Feb, March, trying to get everything built and sent back out. And now a lot of our focus is really on the research and development side. I mean, it's like anything, you know we're never going to be an R&D company where we develop the next microbe or develop the next premium technology, but a lot of what our fit is in the market is evaluating these technologies for our customers to help them understand if it's valuable for their business or not. And so we've spent a lot of time the last 6 months is just trying to get new concepts, new product concepts, new understanding of what these products are doing. I think the biggest thing with the biological side is, or even anything, whether it's B32, whatever it may be, is, the U.S. farmer has an issue today around, overall fertility cost per acre. How do they manage those dollars spend accurately? So a lot of what we're really, focusing on, especially this fall, is like, and again, like I know there's a certain grower group out there that kind of think, oh, biologicals, they're kind of foo-foo juice, blah blah blah. A lot of what we're really trying to do with the next, I'm going to call it next level of our business, is how do we truly take products that are biological, or they have technologies in them that help unlock a lot of that fertility that's already in the ground, whether it's,
Yep.
the residue that you're creating at fall. A lot of these things we're just trying to understand, how do we create more value for a farmer? There's a lot of, and believe me, like our family, we farm. I got people trying to sell me something new every week, no different than John. Um,
Oh
so it's a
yeah.
lot of just really taking the time to understand the product benefits, and then like materially, how is it going to work on a farm? And then from that, how do you help explain it to a grower that may not understand, the biological side as well, to really make it, some first grade terminology on why these things do what they do. And so we're trying to really focus on that. We got a lot of exciting stuff that we're going to do, this fall and next spring. We have I think we're up to about 16 acres worth of small plot stuff that we're doing right there in Princeton around our facility. And then we're going to do a bunch of on-farm trials as well, this next spring, with a lot of different products. And again, a lot of it is just, it's an educational side of it. I never want to assume or portray that, I know everything about it and how it's going to work in every scenario. But um, we're really focused now on kind of taking that next leap of understanding and what, because even with a lot of the products, there's a lot of synergies that happen with when you start building a product and you're putting different biologicals and biostimulants and enzymes and polymers there. There's a lot of synergies that happen between a lot of these different raw materials, so it's really just getting an understanding of which ones work the best together. And then, again, how do you create a true value statement for a grower? And that's what we've been focused on the last year, and that's what we're going to continue to focus on. And it's definitely something, for us, we're putting our family name on it, and we want to make sure that it's valuable to a customer.
So, John, it's are you working like with seed treatments, in furrow starters, two by two, foliar packages? What exactly, or all of it, are you working with?
I would say the year one, it was all, talc graphite seed fluency products, like premium seed fluency products. Year two, as we're kind of getting into it now, what we're starting to work on is water soluble biologicals that go in furrow with starter, or that work as we're kind of calling it a biofertility package. And really, again, like there's a lot of people in the market that are selling residue digesters or residue management products. And from my opinion is like I just don't think that's an accurate way to depict what those products are doing. Yes, they do break down residue, but part of the breaking down of the residue is returning the nutrition back to the soil for it to be reused on that crop. So, we do have a product that we're developing right now, and that's the one that we're really going to be actively working on this winter and into next spring to understand, soil test differences, Haney test differences, soil health scores, and really looking at like what can we effectively change, whether it's a tillage environment, whether it's a no-till environment, whether it's a strip-till environment, and really get some sound data on the effect of nutrition added back to the soil to be readily used. Because again, I just managing residue is part of it, right? Like, I mean, anybody that's in a highly productive area, if you're growing a lot of 250, 260 bushel corn, like you always got a lot of residue, right? So, that's part of it. But I just think that in today's market, when we're looking at $900 phosphates and $800 ammonia and $400, $500 UAN, like, to me, it's more about from a fertility standpoint. If I'm going to do this, what am I getting out of it? Like, I would love to be able to run the planter faster through the field and have less issues with residue, but it is also a much more valuable story on, and especially when you think about if I own the land, like what am I able to return back to my land to have as true nutrition back for those crops? Like, does it limit the use of synthetic fertilizer that I have to use? Like all those things that are valuable parts of the entire economy. Because again, when you look at spread dry fertilizer this year, I mean, it's going to be expensive, and a lot of these, again, I call it biofertility packages, depending on what you're buying and who you're buying it for, like it's relatively inexpensive compared to synthetic fertilizer today. So, but again, like I've seen a lot of companies market it different ways and different types, and we're just really trying to make sure that we understand the science behind it. And again, like this whole biological side of it, like there's so much different stuff out there all the time and new stuff coming all the time. And I think we did a presentation for John and a group here. I think it was back in June, and a lot of people don't understand, why is this technology coming all of a sudden? And some of it's been there, but the reason I explain it for people that are listening that, think about powders and like, well, it probably had to start from a liquid to begin with, is spray drying technology that's kind of got into ag has really changed the way that all these microbes work. In the past, call it even 10 years ago, a lot of stuff was freeze dried, which, made the overall efficacy not nearly as good. But with all the new technology coming to spray drying, and for those that don't know what spray drying is, if you understand what milk powder is, you have to run milk through a spray dryer to get milk powder. So it's a lot of the same way when we look at, if we're taking biostimulants and spray drying them, or we're taking biologicals and spray drying them, essentially we're eliminating the water or any kind of unconcentrated, I'm going to say non-valuable material off that and concentrating it heavily into what you get afterwards. So, when we look at this, I'm going to call it, the planter box market, a little bit goes a long ways because you have 100% AI in whatever you're getting out of that spray dry. So, I've talked to a lot of people before. They're like, well, how much good could it be with only this much going on the seed? My point to them is it's more than you think, because you have no fluff in any of the stuff that's being made. It's completely constituted down to the raw AI of whatever's going in there. So, whether it's again, biofertility packages, water soluble biologicals go in furrow with starter. I mean, really anything like that's what we're focused on right now is just understanding the raw materials that are out there that are going to add value back to the farm.
Hey, John, one thing I wanted to comment on is, so you talked about like the stock breakdown products. I agree with you 100%, but I think so. My focus has been, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this. So my focus has kind of been more of a nutrient release out of those type of products.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of those guys are going out, and what I've learned about it is you go out in the fall, and it's literally a 50-50 if you get that actual visual of that stock breakdown. And
Hmm.
so looking towards that planter going through the field smoother has never, I guess I tried for that to be my focus in the beginning. Now, if you're putting it on with a pivot or you're following right behind the combine, I've seen some benefits in those products. But really what I like to use it for is put it on in the spring and
Hmm.
put it on with my pre-emerge and getting a nutrient release, because some of those products, if you focus in on the right ones and you add certain things, and I think John, I think you and I are on the same page of putting exactly what you can pair with that to make a nice synergistic package. By doing that, you can get some decent nutrient release 60-70 days out, and that's kind of the direction that I use those products for. But there's not there's a lot out there, and there's a few that I truly believe work in
Yep.
a very good manner. But it really, going back to what you said, it all comes down to, it becomes your task that you're talking about for Michlig Ag today is, how do we create products that are going to perform in the end? But we're also against a pretty big task as well, as far as cost. So
Yeah.
there's not any additional dollars out there for the end user.
Yep.
So how do you find the win-win in which we can continue to be a business to create these solutions, but then in the end you got to be able to do it without additional cost, and that becomes very difficult when it comes to putting products together, because sometimes making that product is fairly expensive. So
Yep.
John King, I was just wondering, over the years, you can hear me, can't you?
Yep.
Over the years, I know a lot of these different biologicals that have been on the market are very, very sensitive what you tank mix in with. It
Hmm.
can go ahead and kill a lot of, the biology that is in those tanks. Now, the products that you're handling, are you finding that they are more compatible with, say, nutrients or herbicides or anything like that? I'm sure you run into it, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, most of all of our biological material that we put in our products are called spore formers. So they're endospores, or there's another long name for it. So we focus on using those primarily because they're dormant at the time in which you're putting them into the tank, and then until they are activated by water or either soil contact, at that point, then they begin to uh, form and create and colonize. Um, a lot of the issues that you're talking about is with living organisms, and living organisms and spores are two totally different things. So we focus primarily always on spores because the overall viability of the survivability of them is so much
Hmm.
greater.
So is it dry, or is it like a dry powder, or is it
It's a
also
dry
liquids?
powder. Nope, it's a dry
Dry
powder.
powder. And you can dissolve it into, say, a liquid form if you're going to put it in furrow with a starter, right?
Yep, just like if you were mixing, a dry herbicide, or if you're mixing AMS, whatever you were solubilizing. These are all, they're, we brand them WSP, wet soluble powders. So I mean, they're very fine. I mean, the second that they hit water, they're in solution.
So you go ahead and dissolve it in water and then mix that solution into whatever nutrient package that you're trying to apply. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yep. We usually hit about a half ounce per acre. So,
Okay.
it's
Hmm.
a little bit, and
Small.
again, yeah, a little bit goes a very long way. So, um, it really makes a big difference.
Now, John, as far as your customers, do you sell to growers or just to dealers, or how to everybody? I mean, I was wondering.
No, we do not really sell to growers. We've had guys that we've given product to over the last year just to get more data back and different things like that. Most of it's friends and family that are local that, we know, or they're local to Iowa out here where I'm at, just to get more data and understanding. But pretty much everything's through a dealer. Again, believe it or not, we're a 7-man crew across the entire company. So our focus is really not grower direct. We're always here to support grower sales and be a part of our customers' businesses. But, you know, I just don't, we're never going to have enough people to cover that kind of massive scale. And I just don't think it's a good way for us to go to market. There's a lot of, you get to where Clay Hills is at, nobody knows us, right? Like, we're not the trusted advisor. That's not us. And again, like, our value is partnering with people that they own the relationship, and they want to have some autonomy around the products that they want to sell. And for us, we're just really coming in to help support that.
So you look to work and partner with somebody like John with Clay Hills
Yes.
Ag and try to improve, their different types of technologies and get, the maximum you can out of the nutritional dollar, even if it's, nutrients that are locked up in the soil is what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I would say even on, whether it's the raw material side, like John and I have talked a lot this past year with their granular humic, like, and we've looked at it from the overall viability and how many positive results. And, we've looked at the product specifications, and, even this year going forward, like, we're going to end up using a lot of their dry humic part of our blends because it's a very high quality product. So for us, the value is like, we're getting to work with one of our customers that has something valuable in return. It's not just a one-way street. And that's the fun thing about it for us. And again, we're just very focused from a business standpoint on again, what is good for the grower and what is good for our partners on being able to work with their growers. And we're a small family-owned company. We're flexible. We want what's best for our customers and what's best for their growers.
So these humics and fulvics that John and Clay Hills is all using, isn't that very complementary with what your products are
It
also?
it's extremely complementary. When
Hmm.
you think about overall biology or any of these biostimulants, like, for overall health of the microbes, humics are a huge complement to that, especially in the packaging. When we look at, putting that product together in a package with a humic, all it does is create longer viability for those spores to be able to remain intact and really be promoted once they're in the soil. So, there's huge synergies with a lot of this stuff, and that, again, that's the value of working with good partners.
One thing that can you guys hear me now?
Yep, we got you,
One
buddy.
one thing that we come in and we put this in the place of some other carbon source, or maybe it's another humic or whatever it is. And what we're finding is it's just the same story over and over again, is that the uniqueness of this humic acid is outperforming what we were doing before. And it's crazy when you look at some of the tests as far as the phosphorus release and some of those things. Again, we really have focused on the phosphorus side of things with humic acid for a very long time. So it's crazy to see the increase of efficiency that we're doing, what we have been doing, and then now you put that in a nitrogen play. Um, that is just kind of brings us to a whole new level on. John, one thing I wanted to ask you is do you so I know you're doing some things with amino acids and stuff like that. I think you kind of feel that way depending on the play with an amino acid, but you probably feel that way as far as amino acid use as well in certain situations, don't you?
Yeah, and I would say pretty much all of our products that we make have some form of an amino acid. There's in most of them are they're protein hydrolysates, right? There's some of them are peptides. Um, the biggest thing that we see from the value of the amino acids, especially in combination with biology, is that you have an immediate carbon source for those biologicals to feed on and then really colonize. And then on top of it, when I think about an amino acid, whether it's human health, plant health, human cells and plant cells aren't that different. Amino acids are energy drivers, right? So when amino acids get entered into the plant, all it's doing is providing energy. And a lot of the studies that we've seen this year, because we've got third-party research plots, we're doing plots all sorts of places where we're really checking for biomass. The one thing that we've consistently seen throughout the year is from a biomass standpoint is we're generating a lot of above ground growth. And when I look at that, to me, a lot of that is the energy to get that plant to continue to grow. And we'll see how it translates to yield, but in general, like that's where the amino acids to me are, whether they're paired with biologicals or they're standalone through a little bit more of an affordable product, there's a lot of value in those. And if you look at a lot of nutritionals, from any company, they all have a little bit of amino acids in them. But I think there's just, and like everything, you and I have talked about it, it's the cost to value ratio, right? Like, there's a lot of things in the market that will take a product to a point where the cost is a little bit harder for a grower to stomach. The thing I really like about the amino acids is that it keeps it at a very relative playing field to where that's a big value we can hang our hat on. No different than organic acids with your humic or a fulvic or anything else like that. Like those are all products that are adding value um, to the finished product, but they're not really driving a huge amount of cost to where you can't have it at a still an affordable level for a grower. And that's what I like about them because, again, we continue to see the results. And again, when we pair that with biology, the biggest thing that I'm seeing with it is, again, you have that carbon source there that the biologicals are really able to begin creating energy for themselves, not only for the plant. And then when they colonize that root, there's just a ton of synergies there. So, we put a little bit of like in a lot of our stuff, there's sugars, there's different kinds of sugars. We're looking at that, pretty in depth on, there's monosaccharides, disaccharides, polysaccharides, sugars, what combination of those sugars in a planter box product or a water soluble biological that also adds more benefit because the more that you can feed that biological package, the more one health you're going to get out of the biologicals to really do what they need to do. And then two, you're going to get a better overall colonization.
So one thing I wanted to talk about too, and I don't know, so the big thing, everybody that's coming into my office and some of the conversations I've had with some of the bigger farmer groups that we work with, is pH of, and I'm just going to throw a wrench into what we're talking about, but change in the pH of our final solutions, whether that be, I just want to hear your comments on that, John. So that's becoming a very big thing. We've known it for a very long time, but it's kind of like the humic acid thing. We all knew about the humic acid and amino acids and some of these other things that we're doing for quite a long time, and now it's really becoming kind of the buzz phrase, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's numerous companies that are coming out with ounces or maybe a pint per 100 or something that will drop that pH immediately down. It was kind of interesting. We had a podcast with Kevin Matthews, and he's doing some research for us out in North Carolina. And his comment was, I can spray all of my crop protection out there at 6 or 7 gallons. And as long as I bring it down to like a 4, I think it was a 4.7 pH. So in a liquid form, we think about that pH also, like when we're formulating our fertilizers and in furrows and our 2x2s and those kinds of things. We want to have a 5 pH or something in furrow. Is that something that, number one, I want to get your feeling on it as a whole, and then also in a dry form, is that something that you look at as well when you're producing these dry products?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, we always evaluate the pH of the product and see kind of where it's at. What I would say is we've begun to play around with almost like a water soluble adjuvant, like a pH buffer. The problem that we run into a lot of times with like either our water soluble biologicals or even the planter box stuff is that's where you don't have enough mass to really affect pH. So like when we look at our water soluble biologicals at like a half ounce per acre, that's where you're not getting enough true water buffering powder out of that. Now the base of a lot of our stuff is sugar based. So you're getting, if you have any kind of solidity, it's like anything, you got salt and sugar, right? A lot of guys run a lot of sugar in furrow with their starters because they feel like it buffers it down from the salt content standpoint. But what we begin to look at is we're trying to understand, is there a very low use rate, um, almost like packet that we can make that works as like an acidifier for spray applications, tank mix partners, anything like that, that we can get to, I don't know, I'd love to have it at 50 cents an acre to the farmer, where it's just kind of it's part of the way that they do business and managing their overall pH of their water. The hard thing becomes for us is like, and this is where we've really started to work on it, is it's like everybody's water's different, right?
Yep.
And it's understanding kind of what that table looks like for, if you have really high alkaline water, like how much product you have to use. If your water's more neutral, you don't have to use a lot. What's your bicarbonates look like? So that's a lot of stuff that we've started to look at. We haven't had as much time to really develop it. I mean, a common product that people use is citric acid because it's fairly cheap and it's a strong acid. Um, but we're really trying to, there's a lot of other stuff that you can use too, that different actual polymers, believe it or not, they carry a very low pH, but they bind to the water a lot better than even citric does, where citric just buffers it, where the polymers will actually bind to that water and lower it just as fast as anything. So um, that's probably maybe a year or two out for us right now, just because it's like anything, we're kind of running with our hair on fire all the time, even though I don't have any. But
We need to have a side conversation on that because we've been learning a lot about that lately, and I mean, I think,
yeah,
yeah, man, like it's just because there's been so many people that have come in, and so then it became a focus, and
yeah,
um, I think we've went down the right path, and we're working on some things on that, and it's like if you can create something like that in that price point, for growers to be able to get that pH exactly where it's at, because the thing is, we're seeing the efficacy is
I do,
increased by far, like your
yeah,
spray applications, that's huge. So this Kevin, he's talking about, he drops his total carrier from 15 to 20, he's done to like 7 gallons, and he claims it's the best kill he's ever had. You got to tip right, obviously, but
yep,
he's claiming with that higher concentration of and lower volume, with the correct pH, he's just killing it. So I mean, especially, I think, Jim, you can add to this too. I think he was talking, obviously, he's also pinned down that, okay, pH is extremely important, but when I'm doing fungicides and doing some micro applications, obviously I'm doing that at night,
yeah.
instead of doing that during the day. So the combination of those two things, that he said, has been a huge increase in yield for him and his operation. Like, he would never go back to just not looking at pH or doing those applications during the day. So it's an interesting topic, I guess.
Well, and I think the biggest thing too is when you look at, this past year, I mean, I know at least out my back door, whether it's Iowa or Illinois, HPPD flash was terrible all year, right? Callisto burn, all that stuff. We've just been using a lot of the same chemistries. They're building up in the soil. You make those applications, if it's hot and humid or hot and dry, like the plant digests it a lot differently. So a lot of what we're looking at as we're trying to develop something that's going to buffer the pH is not just do the pH buffering, but add something to it, like how much fulvic acid, trifulvic acid can we add to it? Or is there a stress mitigation type metabolite that we can add into there, so that not only are we lowering the pH, but when we go make that application, we have some mild stress mitigation so that it helps metabolize that herbicide faster and gets it going on to a good day. So that's why I say, like, we're dipping our toe into it. Again, with the spray jag technology that's come out, there's a lot more of these products that have always been liquids that are starting to come now over to the dry side, that we think we're going to have an opportunity to build something. But we just kind of we're getting into that. And what we're looking at next year is for like something specific to that is really trying to understand what price point can we really get a grower that they're going to find value in? How do we, uh, how do we really affect pH? And then, what do we do with it from there? So that's definitely on the top of our list because again, like there's pH buffering products out there that are dries, but they're usually fairly high rate and you're most of them are citric acid based and you're from my experience even with citric acid is if you don't hit your right rates on what you're supposed to be adding you either get way too low of a pH or way higher than you really wanted to. So the dialing in of it is it's a little more tricky than just throwing in something in there. But again, there is some really unique things coming to market that I think are going to be extremely valuable, whether it's a polymer, whether it's whatever, that just a little bit adds a ton of value back to water buffering capacity. So,
These products, go ahead, John. I was just going to ask whether these type of technology products that you're using can be put on dry fertilizer. And if it is able to be put on dry fertilizer, is it in the dry form or is it a liquid that gets impregnated?
I would say with like our biofertility product that we've developed for this fall that we're going to really trial out hard, we are looking at adding a fertilizer impregnation part to the label. And what we recommend customers to do is create a slurry via cone inductor or something like that, and then impreg it after it's a liquid, so you get better even coating. Um, I don't think putting it on just as a dry is going to do much. I think in situations where you have humidity or any kind of moisture in the air, you're going to create a lot more problems. Plus, the bulk density of those products when you get in a blender are really going to just want to fall to the bottom. So we're trying to see if there's value in reconstituting it back to a liquid after it's been that way, and then what the rate looks like. How does it coat? How much water do we need to add to the slurry to make sure that we're getting even coating? So there's a lot of this stuff that I think in the end of the day, it's very multi-purpose, right? Like if you're having a biofertility product that you're trying to break down residue and really return that residue back to the soil as nutrition, in theory, it should help break down synthetic fertilizer and return it to the soil faster and more readily available as well. Um, but those are all things that like I'm calling it, those are our 2.0 versions. And again, from like our standpoint is like we try to be very cautious on claiming anything before we've really actually had
Mm-hmm.
some experience with it and been able to at least in a small way, measure some differences. And it's not always yield. Like in a lot of this stuff, especially from the fertility standpoint, we're really trying to measure how much more fertility are we actually putting back into the soil that's available. And and what's our soil health score look like? How are we really creating a better environment for that crop to grow in? If we do those things, the yield's going to happen.
Well, right now, and if you can, I mean, the thing is the big message is being able to cash some of those checks that all the years
Yeah.
of fertility that those growers have been putting in the ground. How do we start utilizing what I put in the soil forever when times are tough instead of just thinking at it, all right, I don't want to just mine the soil. How do I actually increase the efficiency of that organic bank? How do I release some of that? If you can go and pull all organic bake samples, you probably your mind would be blown on what's actually sitting in there. So how do we access those? That's a big
Yeah.
part. The question I had for you, John, was I've had a lot of different guys come in and say, hey, all right, so there's these seed fluency pouches, pails, and things that guys are doing in the market today, but I got a specific liquid that maybe I treat my seed or I dribble it on my seed, and this is the only thing I put on in furrow. It's a product that's they're huge believers in. Can you walk through the spray drying? So you talked about spray drying, but is it cost effective? Like if I said, hey, I'm really finding this product. For example, we have a bioflavonoid that is just doing some amazing things. So that's something that I want to have, but I don't want to do in furrow anymore. And you got guys that are not doing in furrow in certain territories, and they
Hmm.
use that pail for everything. So how efficient is it to say, all right, I want these three things, but they all got to be spray dried on? Is that something that's a very big task, or is that something that's simple to accomplish?
I would say it all depends on the strain. If the strain is very specific, then it really comes down to how did the strain originate? Because there's sometimes, in a lot of instances, these liquid biological products are probably originating from a dry. And um, and then there's obviously the fermenting side where it's all fermented as a liquid and then it spits out that way. A lot of the companies that are, whether it's biologicals, the bacillus strains, the trichoderma strains that we're buying, it all originates from a liquid that then is spray dried. The biggest thing I would say is spray drying is not a cheap. It's not cheap to do if you're not doing it in large quantities.
Volume, right?
If Yeah, if you're doing it in small batch quantities, depending on the minimums, it's still viable, but it's just not nearly as cost effective as it is what you're doing in large quantities. So, um, I think it really just comes down to is if that strain is very particular to the product that they're putting out, meaning that they're fermenting their own strain and it's very specific to them, then that's something that we'd have to look at is seeing, and a lot of times you send it off to a lab, it gives you a yield analysis of what you're going to get out when you spray dry it. And then they kind of give you the statistics on, what the cost is going to be to get it spray dried. But my biggest thing with a lot of this is like, the planter box side from a biological, I'm going to call it like a biological constitution of getting it into the ground has been very proven here the last 5 years that that is a very effective way to get biology into the soil because it's right on the seed. It's right there. And as the seed's growing, it's colonizing right to that seed. I look at what the research that like New Leaf Symbiotics has done. They've done a ton of research on how their microbes adhere to that seed and then, how many spore forming units are on each seed as it goes through the planter. And, I think for them, even, a lot of the way that they're looking at their businesses, the planter box is really the way that they want to go to market. They have people that want them to figure out how they can slurry it and then, put it directly on the seed. But I think for most of what I've seen is their data supports that the planter box has been the best yield results that they've had consistently. And I think some of that is like when you're doing anything with liquids, like you always have waste, right? You're always going to have spots, whether you're putting it in furrow that there's nothing there, or you're like there's always just a little bit of waste when you get to the liquid side, where the dry side is very much, I mean, it's on the seed, it's right there, and you think about the first days of that seed, it's living off that seed coat in order for it to really germinate and come out. All that stuff that it needs is right there on the seed. And that's why we're seeing so much value in that market right now, is because, my uncle used to always, my uncle that runs the farm always explains this to me. Like, a corn plant is fat and lazy. It doesn't want to work. It wants everything right there next to it. And the less you make it work, the better results you get out of it. Because if it's all readily available and it doesn't have to work so hard, it'll put more energy back into growing the grain. So that's kind of the way my dumb math works too, is when I look at these planter box products, is we're getting it right there in a high concentration that allows it to get up and going.
John, one thing I was thinking, can you hear me?
Yep. Gotcha, buddy.
In an ideal situation, these different products that you're putting together, would you want to spoon feed a crop? Like you've got your seed treatment as far as an application, you've got your starters, you've got your wide drop, and then foliar. Can you see the real benefits if you do go and spoon feed a crop that way with a number of different applications? Or are you wanting one really good application? How would you recommend that?
I think it's always good if you're being very intentional about the times that you're applying to that crop. One, I look at it like we have people taking some of our water soluble biologicals and they're adding it to fertigation programs, or they're doing it with Y drops, or they're doing it with, a bunch of different uh, placements. And again, that's kind of where I go long term with, even when you think about irrigation, right? And for anybody that's listening that's got irrigation in the yard, if you don't get rain for multiple weeks and you continue to irrigate that your yard, it still doesn't look as good as when you get 2 inches of rain, right?
That's
Like
exactly right. Yes.
Absolutely.
irrigation
Yep.
water and rainwater are not the same thing.
No.
Um, so, I mean, and that's like a whole nother rabbit hole that we're starting to look at too, is like, is there stuff that we can do even from a fertigation standpoint to increase the quality of the water that's going on the crop and trick it into thinking that it's almost like it is rainwater? Because I think there's some yield limiting factors to that, right? Like if you got high calcium water or something like that, like you're just, it's kind of like taking a shower in bad, on the old family well, it's different than if it doesn't have a water softener and it's hard water, it's hard on your
That's
skin,
why
you dry it out.
I truly believe that's why the water treatment thing is such a big deal. And
Yeah.
It
I don't know
is.
if you, I don't know if you've been down the rabbit hole of like the ozone water, but
Hmm.
we ended up buying a system, and that's how we treat, all of our blends, everything that goes out. We've actually had farmers come and get, so it's ozone, and then it's treated with hydrogen peroxide to bring the pH down. And it's very
Hmm.
little hydrogen peroxide, but it
Yeah.
doesn't take much. But that going through that ozone, now you have a specific amount of time before that ozone falls back out. But let me tell you, the efficiency of the things that you're doing with that ozone in there, it makes everything as far as efficacy. In that, we've had guys come and pick it up, go spray it out right away, and there is no comparison from well water to that ozone water. And
Yeah.
so our biggest challenge that we have is we know we're on a timeline when getting that out. So if I can get our blends out using that ozone in a period of 20, 30 hours and get it in the ground in that time, which makes it very challenging to do, but it makes a hell of a difference. So it's now what we need to do is somehow hook up our sprinklers or something to the lawn with that ozone water and
Yeah.
see if you can just see if that alone only shines against the neighbors. Like, you would love something there, right? But
Yeah. And like, again, I've had a lot of conversations with guys in Nebraska, Western Kansas. Like, there's just irrigation water and rainwater. They're not created equal. I'm not smart enough yet to figure out what that's gonna, what we can do to make that better. But again, it's kind of like whether we're buffering pH of the water, to make the herbicide applications more effective, or we're trying to increase water quality when we go to from fertigation. Those are all things that again, we're looking at and trying to understand. And a lot of it just comes down to is, understanding who your suppliers are and understanding who the technology providers are. And then it's, the irrigation water, I'm sure, is going to be a long-term study for us. But, those are, again, to me, those are meaningful changes on a farm, right? Like I'm not trying to sell them a product. I'm not trying to sell them zinc or whatever. You're literally trying to help them be more efficient, especially when you get into the situations we have with the aquifers and overall water quality and water availability. Like, if we can make the water more uh valuable to that crop, so we don't have to just keep putting water to it, and it's less water that, essentially you can use less water to get the same effect. I mean, that's going to be another big thing that comes to ag at some point, is just overall water management and how we're able to, use the water we have more efficiently. So again, I don't know if I'm smart enough yet. I'm hoping that that's something that we can, come forward with at some point, but those are things that we're thinking about.
there is some products out there today that are doing that using polymers and stuff. The way they explain it is basically adding it in with your water applications or any other application, but it acts as if just like a diaper, right? It just sits there
Yep.
and holds that. So yeah, water holding capacity. The guy, as far as on that line of it with the water holding capacity is huge. We are seeing one thing I have noticed with our humic acid product. We are noticing some, and I've noticed that in humic acid in general. I don't care what it is. That is just a component of it, is water holding capacity. Basically what you're doing is you're building those macropores, like those little tents in that soil, and it's like a sponge, right? And
Yeah.
so the biggest part where you can see that is the in the sand hills on the top of them sand knobs. You got a guy that's been using humic acid for a couple of years versus across the fence that are not. Those sand knobs are burned up versus
Yep.
grow 140 bushel corn, you know. So it's
Yep.
pretty interesting.
Well, it reminds me so much, guys. You're fairly young yet, but when I was young, my grandma's house we'd go to, they all had a cistern. They would collect all of the rainwater off the roofs into a cistern, and then they had the well water. And that cistern water, that's what they cooked in, and that's what they, washed all their clothes in. And they said it's all soft water if you can collect that rainwater. And it was hard water when it was through the well. And we're talking the same type of a situation here with that's how they were able to go ahead and get better water sources for different things that they were doing. Now, John, one thing I'm interested in is what you're talking about is, reducing possible fertilizer rates that farmers are purchasing in that. What has been the acceptance? Are the farmers more accepting to this type of technology, or is it the dealers? Because, I ran a retail business for 26 years and I wanted to sell tons.
Yep.
And a lot of these older guys, they want to sell tons. What we're talking about is them selling less tons, but actually having the farmer benefit because of that. Who accepts your messaging the best, a farmer or a dealer?
I think both right now, man. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, both are
Okay.
right now because it's driven by the end user, and the end user is screaming and saying these inputs are way too damn expensive. How can we increase the efficiency of these inefficient, high cost? So I would say early on, obviously earlier, I would say it was the grower screaming, right? And now the dealers are looking at it and saying, we have to find an answer to this. And so as a whole, I think the dealers are really starting to come around to this idea because we're proving that there is ways to do that. So, yeah.
So this is the future. This is the total future then, if both of them are accepting it.
Yep.
And I think the biggest thing too is when you look at the capital requirement to be in the dry fertilizer business, to be in the liquid business, like every dealer is running into an issue where the cost to be in that business is so expensive, whether it's people, whether it's dry
Mm-hmm.
fertilizer spreaders, whether it's, capital buildings or, capital expenses. Like it's getting so expensive to be in that business that every little bit of things that you can do from an efficiency factor is saving the dealer money too. So when you think about, lowering rates on dry fertilizer because we're using it more efficiently, that's more acres that a dealer can cover a day, right? So we're getting more efficiency out of that machine. All those things are very, if it's good for the farmer, it's good for the dealer. If it's good for the dealer, it's probably good for the farmer. And I think those things are, with where we're at in ag right now, and obviously the market's been good to us here this week, thankfully. But where we're at with ag right now is like efficiency is a big deal, and nutrient use efficiency is going to continue to be a big deal. I don't see that changing. And for a lot of people listening to this, we're not going to create any new phosphate mines for the next 100 years. I mean, we basically found where it's all at. Um, it's going to go as far as it goes. So we're going to have to continue to be more efficient with all this stuff that we're using in
And
order,
that's the thing,
for the
John.
long-term
Like,
ag.
it's our job, like when we're working with dealers and we're going and trying to find solutions, it's our job to make sure that we can find a win-win. So it's a win for the dealer and it's a win for the grower, and that's really what we got to do. And to do that, you got to find some very unique products in the market today and use them in a unique formulation in different ways to where it can be a win to get the dealer to say, okay, I'm not going to push tons because that was that business. I don't need to push tons. I can use a little less tons, use a product like this, increase the efficiency, and it not affect my business
Yep.
because of this unique delivery system or this unique product. And then at the end, the grower wins as well. And that's the whole
Yep.
idea. It's got to be a win-win. John, I know you got to get going, so hey, really appreciate you coming on, and great conversation, and look forward to doing it again, man.
Yeah. I love coming back anytime. This is always fun stuff for me to talk about. And heck, if we were on here for 4 hours, I could still be here talking four
Yep.
hours from now. So no, I appreciate the opportunity, guys.
Yep.
You
Thank you,
added
John.
so much, and we want to have you back as soon as we can. Thank you,
Hey,
John.
I'm ready for the next one already.
Cool, man. Thanks,
John,
All
John.
right.
John,